Hi, my name is Kevin, and I just want to say a huge thank you to Brad for having me here on his channel. This is so exciting to be doing this. I'm really humbled to be here. This is a really fun project that we're going to be building out. We're going to be using custom properties in a way that maybe you haven't used them before, but I think makes them much more versatile. We're also going to be playing with floats and shapes outsides and all sorts of really fun CSS stuff. I had so much fun putting this together. I'm really happy Brad had me on here because it forced me to push myself a little bit to come up with something really fun where we could learn a whole bunch of stuff. It's a bit of a long video, but I really think it is a fun one. There's a whole bunch of really cool stuff, and this is the type of thing with CSS that gets me excited. These types of things that we're able to do now. So enough talk, let's jump right into it. Okay, so let's get started here. We're starting with a completely blank file, more or less. I don't have very much going on here. I have a link to a Google font and I have a link to my main CSS file here. So if we go and look over here, you can see I have Noto Sans, which is what I've linked over. We're going to be using that for this design. And we have nothing in the page itself. Now I am going to be using Sass to do this. I am using Sass Live Compiler. I know it's a little bit out of date, but we're not really going to be pushing Sass. I just want to keep it really nice and basic for this. If you're not used to Sass, you'll still be able to follow along. There's not a big difference, and I'll explain the differences that I do put in here, but it's going to look more or less like regular CSS for the most part. So the live Sass compiler is just going to automatically update my CSS file every time, and then I'm running live server. So any changes to the HTML or CSS that I make, they will automatically get pushed live to here, so I don't have to hit refresh. And so to get started on this, well, what do we want? We want to have our header area. So I'm going to do a header with a class of hero on it because it's our nice big hero area. And then inside of there, we're going to need a container. And I am using emit here. So you can see as I do .container, it's saying the emit abbreviation, and it's going to give me a div class of container. So if I hit tab on that, it pumps it out for me, so I don't have to do it. We can do some more things with emit than that. So say I have an h1 with a class of main text. And it's also going to have a paragraph, and it's also going to have an A, so an anchor, btn, with the class of btn. And we're not going to have anywhere for that to go yet, so I'll just put the hashtag right there. And I have some text here saved off screen, so I'm just going to grab that and we'll paste that right in there, and I'll see you as soon as I'm done pasting the rest of this in. All right, so you can see that some of that has started coming in there. And after my header, we're going to make a main. It's always a good idea to have a main area, and I know this isn't like a real site, we don't have a navigation or things like that, but I still think it's worth having to have some semantic HTML, just like we have our header here at the top. Now I'm going to have two different sections in my main, so we can do a section with a class of featured, plus a section with a class of, we'll call it our products. It's not really a full products page, but we'll give it that name anyway. And I like separating things just to make it a little bit easier to know what we're working on. So inside the featured section, so like in our hero, we will use a container here just to hold the content from stretching too far apart. We're going to use an h2 called section title. And we're also going to have then, so let's put that in there actually, and we'll call it featured products. And after our h2, and actually I'm writing HTML, I might as well drag this up, and when we start doing the CSS, I can shrink that down. You'll be able to see more of what I'm doing. After our featured products, what I want is a div, and the reason I'm using a regular div here is we need to split that up into 3 columns. So if we want to have, and that's only going to be large screens, but still, I'm going to call this split because we're splitting our content into 3 columns. You can call it a row, you can call it columns, you can call it what you want. I'm going to call it split. I'm going to do A, and then I'm going to give this a class of featured item because it's one of the items, but we're going to have 3 of these. So I'm going to say times 3. So we're going to have 3 of them, but inside each one of those, we're going to want an image plus a paragraph. And inside this paragraph, we're going to give that a class of, we'll call it featured details, double underscore. I'm using BEM here, so details. I'm sort of moving away from BEM a little bit, but I'm not super comfortable with the evolution of where I'm at yet. So I'm going to stick with just doing regular BEM for now. So we have our featured content, then we have our featured items inside of there, and inside of the featured items, we'll have our image, and then a featured details. Actually, each one of these could also have a class on it. So I'm just alt-clicking inside each one of those, and we can give each one of those a class of featured image, just like that. Next up, we can move into our products section. So just like above, we're going to have the same sort of base thing. We're going to have a container. And inside of my container, I want an h2 with the same one as before. So that would be my section title, just like that. So let's hit tab on that, and this one is going to be just like our products we have there. We'll come in with the same thing, our products. And after the H2, now this time around, it's gonna be a little different. We don't need an extra div because we're not splitting things up. 3 different items here. Now, these could probably be articles. Articles are things that are sort of self-contained pieces of information on a page. So I don't think it's wrong actually to make this an article, and it would link to another full page on this that could have a full article on there. So I'm gonna do this as an article with a class of product. And we're gonna have 3 of those once again. I'm just trying to think, because we're gonna have 3, I'm gonna come in and create some modifier classes after this. But we're gonna have our 3 products. Each product is gonna have its own title, so an H3, and this can be product title, plus it's gonna have a paragraph, so the paragraph can have a class of product description, and we'll have another link with a btn in there, so a.btn should be fine. It's not going to be a special button, it's just going to be, we're going to play around with the color of the buttons in a different way than doing something in there. So I think that's pretty much the main organization of this that we're going to do. That's all the content, except I did forget an important thing, so I'm going to come in here and do it really fast. We want an IMG, and we can give that a product image. And there we go, that would be an important step along the way. So I'm going to come through and bring in all the images that I'm going to be using for these and bring in the text, and I'll see you in just a second because that's kind of boring to watch me do that. So I'll do it quickly and then I'll see you on the other side. All right, so you can see I brought in all of these images here, and well, they're all PNG, so I have the transparency on them. They could be WebP if you wanted to do a little bit of optimization on that, but I'm just going to stay simple with these. I do have a little bit more stuff to be bringing in on this. There is a little bit of content missing with these, but I'm going to wait until we're styling it to bring it in. And I'll talk about why that is when we get there. So with all the content in place now, we can actually go into our CSS and start working on there. So I've done this one line of CSS so far, just because it is the thing I do at every single project right at the top. And it's just to reset the box sizing on our site because it makes our lives so much easier. So let's come onto the body next, and I'm just going to do our margin of 0, which is another sort of one we do all the time. I'm just running through on a couple of like reset things that we usually do here. So a max width of 100%, height of auto, and display of block. That just helps on images. I don't really need the height auto because I haven't set explicit heights on my images. So we could actually save a line of CSS for this project by doing that. Here on the body, we might as well set the font family as well. So I was using the 300 and the 700 for this one. So let's just go to the embed. I've already got that. I just want to be able to copy this. And I guess I didn't need to add both of them, but we can add that to our family there. And I am going to turn word wrap off just because I prefer working like that. And most lines of CSS are really short. So right away, we should see that we have a much nicer looking font already coming in there. And remember, I already linked to the Google font at the very beginning right there. Another thing I like doing is a general reset is my line height. I always default, a lot of people use 1.5, I use 1.6. I like a little bit of extra space, I guess, on my lines. And something that's going to get in our way a lot is our default margins. So I'm going to come in and get rid of them all. Paragraph, and do a margin of 0 on those. And we're going to bring margins back. But these tend to, I tend to do that a lot to get rid of the margins on my paragraphs. I am in Firefox. So over here, what I can do is a Shift Command M, and that's going to go to mobile view. I am on a Windows computer, so it will be a bit of a different shortcut. I'm guessing it's I said Shift Command, it was Shift Control M. If you're on a Mac, I'm assuming it's a Shift Command M, but it may be a little different. And just because I prefer doing a mobile first approach when I'm doing my websites. So I just find you end up writing less CSS this way. So because you don't have to override things with media queries, you just add complexity for the most part. Not always true, but I find it's easier to do things this way. So we do have our container, and my container is something that will have a max width on it. But I'm going to start just by saying that the width is 85% with a margin of 0 auto on there. And the advantage with the width 85% is it just prevents things from touching the side. You could just do this with padding instead. So if you did that, no issue whatsoever. I do that on some projects. But we can come in like that. And I think I'll give this a max width 65M. I tend to set my widths with M. I know a lot of people are more comfortable with pixels, but it's just something I've gotten used to doing. If you're not too sure, it's just 65 times 16 because I haven't changed the default, so it's about 1,000 pixels wide as my max width, more or less. So with that done, that's my container. So I always try and start as much as possible also with my generic or my reusable classes. So I'm not jumping right away to styling my hero. I'm trying to style first things like the container. Another thing is like my BTN. It's a reusable class, so we can make our button actually look good. And we're going to do something a little bit interesting right off the line here. But the first thing I'm going to say is display inline block, which is kind of standard, just so padding, margin. I'll show you if you don't know why I'm putting that on there. So the text decoration of none. We'll give that the padding of 0.5M, 1.25M. That looks good. So I'll give it a background, just really quick, background of blue. So you can see it, and a color white, I guess, so we can read our text. And the reason I'm using the display inline block is because if I didn't do that, it's going to overlap the text there. Let's make this up top padding a little bit bigger. See how it's going over the other text? So that's because anchors or links are default inline. So while you can apply a padding top and bottom, it doesn't actually affect the flow. So by doing that now, it behaves a little bit more as you'd expect it to. And you can also add a margin to it now as well, top and bottom. So I'm going to stick with my 0.5 here though. I do want to bring in the heavier font weight, so font weight will be 700. And actually, usually I try and keep all my font properties together, so let's move these guys up here. Font weight, we're going to give this a text transform uppercase. That looks a little better. And also the font size of our button will be a little bit bigger. And that should be perfect. I know it is kind of big, but we're going to come back to that. And actually, why don't we give it a little bit of a border radius? Border radius. I'm going to keep it pretty small, 0.25M on there, just so it's nice little, sort of softens the corners. The shoes aren't hard edges anywhere. We have circles in our design, other things like that. So I think softening up our button does make sense there. Now, one thing I'm going to change right away is for the background color. And we're going to do the background color. Whoops. We're going to do both the background color and the actual color here. So I keep all my text properties together, so we can leave that there. But my background, what I'm going to do is do a variable. And we're going to say, I'm going to give it the color accent. And I'm going to do a comma, and we're going to stick with blue now because the blue really stands out. We could put a nicer color in there as the default. And you'll notice that I'm using a CSS variable, but I've never declared a CSS variable anywhere yet. And so we are taking a bit of a different approach to CSS variables, but you'll see why, I think, as we move through on this project. So we can do the same thing here. Var color, we'll just call it color text, and we're going to do white here, or even, you can do FFF. And so it's going to default to this because this doesn't exist yet. We're going to come to it though, don't worry. If you're a bit confused by it, don't worry. It's going to make it all worthwhile setting this up. So we'll also come in here and do my button hover. Dot button focus, and on those, let's just do a transform of scale 1.1 and maybe a opacity of 0.9 or something like that, just for a really small change. It'll jump out a little bit, and that lower opacity, you won't really see it too much, but it causes a little shift in color change. And I guess we could transition my transform over, let's say, 250 milliseconds. And we'll do an ease in out. And I'm going to put a comma here because I'm going to do 2 transitions. My second one will be on my opacity, which will do it a little bit faster. We'll say 175 milliseconds, and I'll do linear. And just like that now. And here, I'll do it to 0.5 just so you can see that the opacity is working. Actually, I don't like that those are different. I'd have them both run at the same speed. Probably looks a bit better, but again, I'm going to keep this as really subtle. I just want a small little shift in color. I think the jumping forward is going to be enough, and if I tab onto it too, we're going to see that. So perfect. I'm not going to get rid of the outline. Chrome has a bit more of an obvious outline than Firefox here does. I'm going to leave that on there. Nothing wrong with leaving the default outline, especially Chrome has changed theirs recently, so it does look a little bit better. We're not getting that blue glow anymore. We're going to style our title first, and I called it main text. I should have called that main title, not main text. That makes more sense. So here we can have our main title. And actually main title maybe is a bad name just because we also have a main here, so it could cause, so why don't we call this primary title? I think that's a bit better of a name. Whoops. Primary title. There we go. So for my primary title, let's play with the font size. I'm gonna have some fun with this. We're gonna throw a clamp in here. So if you don't know about clamp, it is recently gained a lot of support. So if you're not, let's do 2. We'll do font size of 4 rem. So if the browser doesn't have support for it, you will be fine. It will default to this. But if you do have it, we could do a 3 rem. Here I'm going to put like we'll do 5 viewport width, or maybe, yeah, 5 viewport width plus 1 rem, just so there is, and this is a nice thing with clamp, you don't need calcs inside of it. And then here we'll max it out at like a 4.5 rem at large screen sizes. Sass is, my live Sass compiler is yelling at me, so I will throw a calc in here, but if I wasn't using Sass, or maybe even the newer version of Sass wouldn't yell at me. So you shouldn't have to do that, but I'm going to throw it in there. So actually now if we look at my primary title, and I have to save it here too, so it's updated, so you can see it's gotten bigger. And actually before I look at what that does, line height can be 1 on this guy, or maybe a 1.1. So now you can see that the title is shrinking a little, it's getting bigger, and then at one point it caps out in size even though my screen is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So here, just to show you, it's getting bigger, but then my font size caps out at one point. So the smallest it can be is 3, the biggest it can be is 4.5, and in between it's going to grow at this rate. So a nice, really cool way to sort of handle some responsive typography. Really, really fun. I love that so much. So yeah, there we go. So that's looking pretty good. Last thing we're new on here is a text transform uppercase. And actually, I'm going to bring this back down to 1 now. When you have uppercase text, you can tend to get away with some smaller line heights. We can also come in next with our section title. Actually, I'm going to leave that blank. Let's style this up here because, it's more fun to do it that way. But in general, I like organizing things and doing a lot of the more boring stuff first, to be honest. The more generic things get reused and then come back into style the different areas. But we do have our hero here, so this is going to have first away text align center. So by doing that, everything in that area should automatically become centered. We can give this some padding to give it some space to live in. I'm going to go pretty big, like a 15M0. That looks not too bad. And I think the next thing is we want to bring in a background. So I'm going to go background image. And I have a URL that we're going to use on this one, which is an image. We're going to use I think the shoe 3, oh wait, made a mistake there, to go back a step, and I think it's the shoe 3 that I want to use, which I already have in the design, but that's okay. So we're going to go with the shoe 3, and let's just hit save and see what that does. There we go. So my shoe has come in, but it doesn't look fantastic now, right? It looks okay, but it's repeating in a kind of weird way. Now, you could do something fun with this. If we did a background size of like 10%, maybe that's really small, but you could do some like a cool pattern like that if you have a good image to work with, and create something like that. But in this case, I'm not going to do that for my size, but if you like that, you could always experiment with that a little bit. But what I'm actually going to do here is bring in a second image. And this second image isn't really an image. It's going to be a radial gradient. And we're going to do some dark colors on here. So 444, 111 should be relatively dark. There we go. And that's looking okay, but I still can't read my text. That's kind of annoying. And it's going to be worse because here on my text, I will eventually, we want to color white on that. That makes it even harder to read on a white shoe. That's terrible, Kevin. And you're right, it is. And one thing you could also do here is just a background color of say 222 or something. So if ever this breaks for some reason, at least people are left and they can read the text. So that could be a good backup to have on there. So what I'm going to do is then do a background blend mode. And on my background blend mode here, we're going to set it to multiply. And hit save, and it's all disappeared. Oh, we can't do my background color then? We can't have my background color then. Didn't realize that. Okay, we're going to put in something here because it is possible someone's on a browser that doesn't support background blend mode. So what I'm actually going to do here is say that my background is my 222, and then I'm going to do @supports, and we're just going to copy this line right here. So if you don't know supports, this is a feature query. And so what we're saying is, and I'm going to change this just to the background like that. So if I grab you and drop you in here, this is exactly, if the person's browser supports background blend mode with multiply, they're going to get this. If it doesn't support background blend mode, it's just going to skip this whole section. Or actually, if it doesn't know what @supports is, like Internet Explorer, then it's going to skip this and it just doesn't work. If they're using some browser that for some reason doesn't support this, and it's just going to turn that whole thing off, and it's going to give you this instead with a nice simple background, so you know that the text can be read, which is obviously really important. So I'm going to throw that in there. It's almost no more work to do it. Now one quick thing is, because I'm using Sass, I can nest it. Normally, if you weren't using Sass, you would have to do your @supports, property value here, and it can be any property value pair. And then here you would do your .hero and then have your styles for that. So because I'm using Sass, I can nest it inside. One of the reasons I like using Sass. So just know that you can't, yeah, you would have to do it like this if you're writing a regular CSS for it to work. All right, so we need to space everything out that's in here. And I think what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to make a generic class called spacing. You can see places where they call it, this is from Andy Bell and Hayden Pickering, called it stack, I think, or the stack. Andy uses a lot called flow. I'm just going to call it spacing. And what I'm going to do is, spacing is not going to do anything, but it's the direct children inside of it will. And I'm going to do a bit of the same thing. I'm going to say a margin top, and I'll explain this exactly in a second. Margin top is going to be a variable of spacer. And if spacer doesn't work, it will be 2rem. So what this is saying is any element that is the adjacent sibling, so it comes after the first another sibling, that is the direct child of spacing. So it looks a little bit weird. Don't worry about performance in using it. But what I'm going to do here is on my container, I'm going to put spacing. And you can see it added that spacing. So if we take a look in here, what this has done is it's added a margin top to my button. It's added a margin top to this, but it hasn't added a margin top to that. That's because it's this. Does it have a sibling before it? It sure does, this paragraph. Does this paragraph have a sibling before it? It sure does, this H1. Does this H1 have a sibling before it? Nope, it has nothing. Well, it has its parent before it. So there's no sibling before it. It does not get that spacing before. So things like this can be really nice in just getting uniform spacing, especially since we turned off all our margins earlier on. So I've become a big fan of using this. Let's shrink that back down. If you want to know the window snapping thing, it's Windows Power Tools that I'm using. I think it's called it's Power Toys, Power Tools, Power Toys, Windows Power Toys. Check it out. It's from Microsoft. Really, really cool. You can set up zones and have things click into them really easily. The last thing I'm going to do actually is, let's go back down to our hero here. So we've set all of that up. We'll also do our background attachment is fixed. And my background repeat is no repeat. So we get that shoe in the background, and it just scrolls so it looks a little cooler. It's like a super easy parallax win. And yeah, I think it's fine. I think the positioning of the shoe is fine. If you want to play with the positioning, I guess we could do a background position of center. It's saying it is centered. I'm just thinking here. Oh, I did Y. That's why. I went too fast there. There we go. That should be better. It was bugging out because it was the wrong. There we go. So it's actually centered in that space more. You could play around with positioning if you'd rather something else, but I think that's perfectly fine. Looks good at big screen sizes. Looks good at small screen sizes. we are good to go. So now we are moving on down to this next area, so we might as well style up our section title. So the first thing I can see right away is I want a text align to be center. Once again, we can use our variables on this. So our variables are clamps. We can say a font size of clamp, and I'll say clamp. In this case, what did we do on the last one? 3 up to 4.5. So we can do like a 2.5 rem, calc. We'll do 5 viewport width plus 1 rem again. And again, you shouldn't need, if you're doing regular CSS or if you're using an updated Sass compiler, I'm guessing, you won't need to do the calc nested inside of here. And then we can cap it out at like a 4 rem. So it should still be a pretty big font size. I want to have big font sizes on it still. So that looks pretty good. And actually another thing, our sections are going to be really tightly smushed together right now. So we could say our section, all of our sections can have some padding. Let's just try 7 and 0 and see. That looks okay. I like finding a number that's going to be okay at small sizes and big sizes. And right away at small sizes, I see that this doesn't look good. So we can move back down to here and fix the line height on this. So my line height will be, again, usually a 1 or 1 point something will be perfect. I think that's okay. I'm actually going to change the color here too. I have this dark blue that's saved off screen, so we'll go with that. Now these are things you could also set up as custom properties at the top. Again, for this one, I'm just going to play with custom properties in a bit of a different way, but normally for all my colors, I would have them set up as in the root if I plan on reusing them. All right, so that's looking okay, and that should have also at the same time fixed, this one's going to be looking a little bit nicer too. So let's get these shoes set up and do some stuff with them now. So this is a fun one. So I'm going to come up a little bit here because we have my spacing. I'm going to go here with my container because I had my split. And the reason I'm bringing this up here and not leaving it with the other parts is because if this were a bigger site, this would be something that would be reused. I'm doing this in a way that I guess people normally would. You have a display flex, which is going to make your columns, which is fine because at big screen sizes, I want to have columns. But ideally at small, I don't want to have columns. They should stack. And I don't really want to do this with a media query because I don't think we need one. So I'm also going to do a flex wrap of wrap, which means that if there's not enough room, instead of shrinking, the items will stack. But that's not exactly what I want because I want them to be columns here, but not columns here. So what we can actually say is we're going to use a nice, actually this should be all direct children. This way around, we don't want it there. So all direct children of my split are, and you could use the ampersand here. So the ampersand in Sass is pretty much saying retake this. So it's going to pump out a dot split star, and it's going to write the CSS right here, like that once it's compiled. So that's exactly what I did here. So I just saved myself some characters pretty much by doing it. And when I save, they get smushed together, which, whatever. And then this is where things get a little bit interesting is I'm going to do a flex basis of 30%. And, oh, look at that. Now we have columns again. Now with flex basis, what you're saying is what's sort of the ideal size? So when I didn't have a flex basis, their default width for these, because they're block elements, I made them block, they're images, or they're not images, those images are in divs. So those divs have a default width of 100%. They're auto width, so it's 100%. So they're trying to get to 100%. By saying the flex basis is 30%, now it's saying, no, forget that width they had. We want them to be at 30%. An interesting thing with flex basis though, is you can also set, and it's sort of like having a width and a max width on it is almost the exact same thing. So I'm going to put a min width of 15em here, which means that they can't be smaller than 15em. Now, you might say that might cause some side scrolling. It will if you get beyond like super small. If we bring up our calculator here, 15 times 16, 240. So it's, I think you'll be fine. So you do want to be careful with that. Min widths, you always want to be very careful that your minimum width won't cause side scrolling, but I think we'll be okay. So what it's saying is these images need to be at least 15em, but if there's room, they can go next to each other because it's display flex. And if they're all next to each other, they can actually grow and keep growing, and now they're stopping just because they're inside the container, which is limiting their width. So we can create a nice, and even if I drop this down, we'd see it in play a little bit more. So once they go next to each other, they start growing. I'm going to stick with my 15 though, because I don't want them to get too tiny. Now, another thing that we can do, because we have display flex on here, I am going to put a gap. Now, this gap is not supported by Safari yet, but it's coming, hopefully. So I'm going to use it. You could find other ways of doing this if you'd want. You know, it's a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to use a gap of 1em, which is just going to put a space of 1em between these items. And actually, we can see that. Let's open up my DevTools. And if I take a look at this, we should have... if I turn it on, so you can see there's put a gap there and a gap there. But look, there's all this other space that's left over here. That's not being used. So what I'm also going to do here is a justify content center to make sure they're always in the middle. And the advantage of that as well, justify content center, what it's going to do is, let's turn off this because we don't want it right now. When I get to small screens, it's also doing this. So remember, before I had the justify content center, we were getting this annoying layout. This, I think, is a lot more interesting. And we get the shoes like that. It's not perfect by any means, but I do think it looks a little bit better. And the nice thing with the gap is, now the gap is going to be between them vertically, right? Because the gap is the space between these elements. So here, let's go back at split. So here I can see that there's a space there of 1em. And you can see even here we have 1em between them that way and 1em between them here. So the gap is always keeping that. If you're used to grid, you already know how gap works. Maybe we could actually pump that up to 2. So it's always, no matter what layout it is, they're always getting that spacing. So I really can't wait for Safari to start supporting gap. I am going to come on to my section title here, and we're going to add a margin bottom on this, because if not, it's just going to be really annoying. Let's just do 3rem. Create some gap there, maybe even bigger, 5. I think it's going to work fine for both of these sections, so we can do something like that. Now I want to make these look a little bit nicer, and we do have other content that's actually going to be brought in on them in a second. But before we get to that, we're going to come down now, because this is more specific to these items. So you'll notice my split was really layout based, and I always like splitting separating my layout from the design and the content that's inside of the layout. So my split here has styled everything that is layout wise for this section, but I could reuse that somewhere else with completely different content inside, and that content is going to work in exactly the same way. Really doesn't matter what's inside of this. So this is literally just holding these things in place, and then I'm going to come down and style what I need to do in that area and make it look the way I want it to look. Regardless, you know, doesn't matter what the layout is, this is just what it looks like, this one individual piece. So if we come and look at our HTML, this is in our featured area, and these are our featured items. Now I made these links because the idea would be you'd be able to click on them all. I know some people don't like putting stuff inside links. You're allowed to do that now. I'm not breaking the rules. And I'm also going to make these links, well, you could say display block if you I'm saying these links, so I'm thinking ahead. I want these to be my featured. And what you could do, because this is Sass, I could do featured there and then say and items. And I could work on this. People get angry with nesting. I'm starting to embrace nesting a little bit, but let's just say color is red. I just want to show you, if you are nesting things in Sass, it's okay. So if we look at our compiled CSS here, it should be at the bottom. I just get my featured items. So it's not creating this weird nesting or anything like that if you use Sass in this way, like that. Whereas if I just did here, if I did dot featured items for some reason, featured items, color blue, just for fun. If we go and take a look at what that would spit out, it would actually make a featured space featured items, and I'd have my blue. So obviously this is more what we're after than that, just to keep it a little bit simpler in the compiled CSS. So this one we'll get rid of. So the ampersand again is just taking this and plugging it in there, letting me save a few keystrokes. So my and items, which are my links, we're going to say, you could say display block on these. I don't think we need to in this case because they're flex items now. And as soon as something becomes a flex item, it doesn't really matter what its display property is anymore. They behave as a flex item. They don't behave like a block element or an inline element or anything like that. So not a big deal, but we'll put it on there anyway. You know, just in case one of these would get used somewhere else, I guess. And actually, you know what, the featured here, I think I wanted to lighten up the background a little bit. So background could be maybe like an EEE, just to separate it a little bit from this next section. So on these items, I think we're going to need a position of relative on them because we're going to have some pseudo elements that come in to play here soon. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to do a transform, and we're going to take the scale and we're going to scale them down, so like a 0.85 or something like that, so they should all get a little bit smaller. Transform. Did that work? 0.5. That is, oh, is it item? Featured item, no S. Close my actual CSS so I don't write anything in there. Featured item. There we go. They're super small. So we don't want them that small. I'm going to go up to an 8.5. And then, because I'm using Sass, I can do an and hover. And we can do a focus on this as well. So an and focus. And here the transform will be a scale of 1. Of course, that's going to look kind of weird, so we'll bring in a transition of transform. We'll do the 250 milliseconds, and I'll just do an ease in out. And now we can make our shoe grow a little bit when we hover on top. So that's kind of fun. Another thing though I want to do on these is, and again, what this is outputting here is just going to be a featured item hover. So it's literally making a whole selector that's just featured item hover, comma, featured item focus is what this is doing right there. So you can see how Sass, some simple Sass nesting, it doesn't make complicated selectors if you do it right, and it can be really useful in speeding up a little bit. So here I want to add the circles that are going to go underneath this shoe. And to add that in, we're going to use a pseudo element. So that's going to be on this. So we're going to come here. Also, my brackets, you can see they're colored differently. This is really useful in JavaScript as well. I'm just using an extension called bracket pair colorizer for that. So that's why here it's yellow, then it goes to purple, and then it goes to the blue. In JavaScript, obviously, you have lots of nested brackets, and this works for square brackets too. It's not doing it in my CSS, but if it was in, I think it does anyway, but it works for these ones as well. If I have some, there you go, you can see that those are changing color too. So it can be really useful just to keep track of how things are nested instead of trying to find it here, if you know what I mean. So here I'm going to say an and after. So that's my pseudo element. Anytime you have a pseudo element, you need to give it content to make it exist. So we'll do that. I'm going to give this a position of absolute, and that's why I gave this a position of relative, because I knew I was coming in with this guy. And so position absolute, and then we're going to do a background, our position absolute, we should do our top. I'm going to give this a width. Actually, you know what? I want to make sure it's a perfect circle. So I'm going to do the padding trick here. Because if I say I said like top, bottom, left, right, if this isn't a perfect circle, like the div that this is inside of, and it probably isn't, let's just give this a border of 1 pixel solid red so we can see it. So it's a little rectangular, and I don't want my one here to come out rectangular. I want it to be perfect circle. But I also want to make, and you know, how do you match your width to your height? You could use JavaScript or do other stuff, but another trick is to do padding of 100%, 100%, 0, 0. Because paddings, if you do padding 100%, it's based on the width, not on the height of something. Always good to know. Same with margins. You give something a margin top in percentage, it's based on the width of its parent. So it's gonna be 100%. So let's just see if it worked. Background is red. Yeah, we'll start with red and we'll change it after. So you can see it's a perfect square that is the width and the height are matching each other. This is 100% of the parent and 100% of the width of the parent, or this is the top. So 100% is, even though it's on the top, it's using the width. Padding is weird like that. So those are nice perfect circles that we're getting in there. Awesome. Or perfect squares. So to make them circles, border radius of 50%, and they have vanished completely because now they have no color. We should have kept a color on there. Background on this, I have a color that I have off screen here. And there we go. Now obviously we need them to be underneath the shoe, so I do need to come in with some top properties here. Is top 0 going to work? Oh, I think so. And I don't know if I have to, but left 0 didn't move, but I'll leave it on there anyway. But now we need it to go backwards, so z index of -1. Do I want to do that? I think I have to. Oh, perfect. I was worried that it would actually go behind the gray background, but there we go. Perfect. it might actually be this transform that's preventing it. If I take off my transforms, yeah, when I have my transforms off, it's going behind the gray background. But fun thing with CSS is stacking context. So when you have transform on something, you're creating a new stacking context. So the -1 is within this instead of being within the scope of your whole site. And actually, stacking context is one of those things that's super useful to learn. It's always rare that you run into issues, but when you do, it's a nightmare. If you understand how it works or the ways of creating new stacking context, you can often solve your problems pretty quickly. So there we go. That looks pretty good. I'm not sure I love the size. I don't know what would happen, actually. I've always done 100%, 100%. I'm trying to think, if I did that, and then this is 25%, is that going to center it? No, eh? That wouldn't work, would it? No, that looks terrible. I am just we're gonna go with like a 10-10. I think it's gonna be perfect. It looks pretty good for all those shoes. So I'm gonna leave it like that, I think. I'm pretty happy with that. The next part of this, to make it a little bit more interesting, and again, this should work at all screen sizes right now, so that's perfect. What I am going to do though is I'm going to come back into my index because I did want to have a little bit of extra content in here. So I'm going to go in all of these on the details, and I'm going to bring this in. And the first thing I'm actually going to do is a span with a class of price. And so the price can be, they're on sale. They're only $99 each for these. Close span. Oh, we already had the close span. Whoops. And then after my span, we can come in and put in the shoe name. And actually, I'm going to leave that stuck together, and you'll see why in a second. Shoe name. Actually, I don't think it matters one way or the other. And we'll come over back to here, and you can see it doesn't look fantastic. So on my item, actually, yes, this is my link. So we're going to do a text decoration of none right away to get rid of the text decoration. The color, we'll just do like a dark gray. Text align center, I think, will work. If it doesn't, we'll do something else. There we go, that does work. And what I want is, we're going to stay in here now, my span is going to be a display of block. I gave this a class, so I guess it doesn't really need to be nested in here, but it belongs in there. And I guess I didn't have to give it a class, whatever, or you can do a dot price, whatever you want. My price is going to be a font weight of 700 because I want it to be bold, and a font size much bigger. Let's go with 3 rem. Maybe that's too big. Try 2 instead. You know, you could have some fun with this. And this whole item, I think I'm going to shrink the line height on it. Line height of 1. That's too tight. 1.2. That looks pretty good. So when we hover on top, we have that on each of them. I think my image dimensions were a little different because you can actually see this one's butting up against that. It makes it a little harder to read. I prefer these a lot more. But what I'm actually going to do with the span, no, not the span, the whole featured details, and actually my span, I guess, could be nested in there, but whatever. We're going to do, and I don't know. Item? Yes, we're going to be here. No, I'm in my item. And item featured. So actually I have to break out. So we're going to break out of here, and I'm going to bring my span with me in a second. So featured is yellow. So I want to stick in, yeah, so we're here. So I'm going to say, and it was featured details. Details. And on my featured details, yeah, we're going to bring that span into there, because that's sort of where it belongs a little bit more. Let's give it an opacity of 0. Oh, I just broke everything. Oh, it's all broken because I misspelled featured in featured details. Featured. I should have done that all in one shot, but whatever. We're there. Ah, we fixed it. Okay, good. All right, so now what we want to do is I'm actually going to come in here and we're going to say that, yeah, the details opacity is 0. Ah, now it's working. Okay, good. And then what we can do is I actually want it to be, I'm just trying to think because I actually want it to be in here. So I am going to nest this because it has to be anyway with the selector. So then it's going to be I have to actually write the whole thing out now just because of the way Sass works. So featured details, opacity will go up to 1. And there we go. We can see it click on and off just like that. And again, if this was not using Sass, let's just go look at what that looks like compiled. It'd be faster than writing it out. So that's giving me kind of a long selector, or even that could be on 2 lines. So it's the featured items hover, and then the featured details inside of that, the opacity is going up to 1, and then the same thing on focus. So that's what we're up to right there. So when we do that, now obviously I don't want it to look like that. So here we're also going to transition the opacity. We can do the same time, 250 milliseconds. We don't want that, we just want a space, 250 milliseconds. And I generally do, I think it was the keyframers who mentioned for opacity, linear transitions actually look perfectly fine. So you can see those are fading in like that. And actually I thought we were gonna have a bit of a problem. The spacing on these actually might be a little bit too big. And I'm happy we didn't run into another problem that I was a little worried about though. This is actually all the way in my split. I'm wondering, or actually here, just to show you a little bit of how I plan on using these. This could be like my default spacing, or no, this isn't my split. That's my split here. We had my gap of 2M. So maybe, yeah, it was here. So it wasn't where spacing. It's actually still not that bad. I was a little worried the prices were going to overlap onto one another, but I guess our margin's big enough on those. Our spacing and everything is perfectly fine. So we get to there, that's still looking pretty good. Ideally, that wouldn't overlap on there. One thing you could do, I don't know if I'm going to like this. Let's try it. On the hover here, we could also give this a text shadow of 0, 0. Do like a 0.25M and an RGBA because I want white. Now this is another thing you can do with Sass. You can do like a regular thing and then 0.25, and Sass will make that an actual RGBA, which is cool. But we don't seem to be getting it. Let me just put this as 1M. Oh, it is there. It's really subtle. So you can see it is coming up on those there. To make that 2. I want something a little, like, I don't want it to be really big, and we could use some positioning and stuff to try and get these all to be the same. Ideally, I think it's just because my image sizes weren't exactly the same, probably because this shoe's at more of an angle than this one. So ideally, you'd come in and make sure you have a template and you're dropping your shoes in there. I exported these all at like actual size. So maybe that was a little mistake on my part. But overall, I think, you know, it's good enough for what we're up to, and we sort of have a little fallback there. Because if we drop that text shadow, you see how it's a little bit difficult to read. It's not making like this big night or day difference, but it's a little fallback, and you're never going to notice it when it's on this light gray background. So that is a nice little way that you have a little interaction. If you tab onto them too, they're doing the same little growing thing, so that's kind of cool. And I think that looks pretty awesome. So there we go, perfection. And now we can move on to our products. And for this one, so we can come all the way down, and it's our products. And we're in a new area of our site now. Actually, I don't know if we have to style anything on our products, just because if we come and take a look, I mean, this is my section, which has the padding on it. I don't need to change the background color or anything. The container's doing its thing. This is doing its thing. Now we can just come in down into these individual, like the product itself. And we're gonna have a lot of fun in here. So here it's just gonna be .product, singular. And so on here, what I wanna do is, let's give this first a background so we can see a little bit more what's going on. But I'm gonna do this as a radial gradient. And just to make it easier, we'll put it on multiple lines. And let's just do like a red to yellow so we can see if it's working. Red to yellow like that, and my semicolon goes here. There we go, so it is working. But now instead of doing red to yellow, which is, it looks really ugly, but what I want to do is a variable of, we're going to do color inner, because you can see the red was the inner color. And we're going to do a comma, and yeah, let's do lime green. I want something ugly. Now, you don't have to do this with ugly colors, but it's one way of saying like you should set a variable here, and it's, you know, it's letting you know that you didn't. Or you could have a default that's actually nice, but if you need to overwrite it, you can. So let's say lime green goes to purple, like that. And of course, this isn't working because here I need to have my var color outer. That's what happens when you talk and code at the same time. And this has to be and after all that, I have a space here too. So a few mistakes in there, but there we go. A really ugly gradient in the background. So again, this could be, you could either put in some nice defaults. It's probably a better idea that you have some nice defaults as your first stage. And your nice default could even be another variable that's coming from your root if you have your color set up in your root. So in this case though, we're not going to do that. And I wish Prettier wasn't automatically fixing that, but we can see what's going on here. So we have my background there. Obviously some padding on this is going to help. So let's just do like 3M on the top and bottom. I'm not going to put any on the left and the right. We're going to see why as we go through this. We've already put some rounded edges, border radius. This one, it's a bigger than our button. So we're going to go with a border radius of 3 because we want, you know, it's a bigger square. So we have the tiny little button, small corners. This is bigger. We can have bigger rounded corners. We have those circles there. So I think it'll help pull things together. So border radius is 3. Last thing I'm going to do for now is do actually I'm trying to think. I put padding, no, I think here I'm just seeing the text stuck to the sides. We're going to go with a padding on all the sides. And then we can do a text align. So I'm going to do a text align center, but I don't think we want one actually. We're going to leave it like that. And hit save. And margin bottom would probably be good. Margin bottom of, say, 3M. Just to... I said we're going to keep them small. There we go. I think that's better than the big 3. I forgot to put the text on the buttons, but that's okay. We can bring that in as we go, because we're going to have to jump into our HTML anyway to make some changes here. The first thing is I have my product title. So we are going to keep this in here, even though it's typography related. It's really a title that's linked to here. So the title, font size. I'm just going to stick with a, I'm going to stick with a big value. We could bring our clamp back in here too. We can give this a color of FFF and a text shadow. I'm going to do a 0, 0, like a 0.2M. We can always play with that. And then an RGBA. And again, because this is SAS, I can actually put in black and then a 0.2. Is that going to be too dark? I'm going to leave it like that, but our backgrounds are going to change color. So we'll see what those are going to look like after. That's not too bad. Actually, I'm trying to think. On small screen sizes, actually, we probably are going to want, actually, and the line height there is terrible once again. So line height can be 1, well, probably a 1.1. That looks better. And I will do the text align center. I said I wasn't, but we're going to go with the text align center on there, because at small screen sizes, that is looking a little better. Now you're probably saying it looks really ugly. So we are going to come in here and I have my product. And we're going to call this one, should we give it by color or by number? I'm going to give it by color. And it could be something that's, you know, this could even be coming from like a data attribute, which is also controlling the shoe that's coming in. If this was a more dynamic project, if you're using a framework or something like that. So your class name here, instead of using a class name, you could be putting a data attribute on there that's pulling a specific image. And at the same time, you could have, you know, with the image is you have your red shoes, your blue shoes, something like that. So I'm just going to call this one shoe red. And again, it does, you know, we could, and this one will be shoe. So we have our shoe white, and then we have we have this shoe and this shoe that are both white, but we'll go with the shoe blue, just so we can add some blue colors in there. And then this is the idea. It's also going to come in, actually, while we're there, and actually while we're here, we can also come in and fix these, just to say buy now. There we go. That looks a little better then. Remember we put that spacing, we created our spacer class too. So on here, we could also come in to each one of these, and after that, and that, we could add in our spacing. And just like that, we get convenient, nice, uniform spacing on all of them without having to write anything. And this is where these utility classes start coming in as you're styling something up. So that's looking pretty good. It doesn't look terrible. Well, the background color looks terrible. So let's go and fix those. I generally would save this for a little bit later. I guess we could do the hero at the same time, or we might come back and fix the hero. So what I'm going to do is do a shoe red, and we're going to say the color inner. I'm just going to red. We're going to change these colors in a second, but I want to show you how this is going to work. And color outer can be orange, and just like that, that one changes. Because remember, the way we set this up was we have a product, and our product wants to use the color inner and the color outer. But if they don't exist, then it's going to go to the lime green and the purple, and it looks like crap. But if we do decide that, and this, then the way this is nested is really important. So this, you know, depending on where the shoe red is declared, if it was declared inside the product, it might not necessarily work. It has to be declared on the product itself or further out, because custom properties get inherited. So here it's the product, but it's also my shoe red. And you know, if you're using BEM, you could also have like a product red or whatever it is you want, like that. But we could have our shoe red and bring in our colors. So we're also going to do that for our shoe. And actually, there's another color that we could bring in, which is our color accent. And let's just make this one lime green, because that's an accent color, just for a second. And you can see that changed that button. So remember, we did the exact same thing early on when we set up our button here, where we told it to be blue. But if we set up, it's looking for color accent. So it's saying, what is color accent? There is none. It's going through my site. It's not finding anything, so it's staying blue. But then this button is inside of shoe red. Shoe red does have a color accent, so this is going to stop right there and grab it. So using custom properties like this is super powerful, and you can really do a lot of customization. You can even do light and dark modes with it. You can do so much with it. I'm so excited. I love using them in this way. Now, normally I would have stuff in the root as well, but being able to customize things on like a component basis like this can be so useful. And you can see, because of the way I didn't put colors, I was just playing with the opacity. So you can see like there is a slight color shift, but it's coming from the opacity change. So what I'm going to do really fast here is I'm just going to duplicate those. That's a Shift, Alt, and down. And we can change this to my white and blue. Whoops. And really fast, I'm going to speed this up so you don't have to watch. I'm going to update these colors. All right, so I brought all the different colors in, but I haven't hit save yet. I'm leaving that satisfaction for you to be here with me on that one. So let's sit here and let's hit save, and look at that, all the colors update. So I've made really gentle gradients, as you can see, because I think gentle gradients tend to look a little nicer. And then I've made an accent color that just sort of punches out a little bit. So, and you know, we set up our hero to be able to do something really, really similar. So on the hero, we could do the same thing. We could have our dot hero and say that just down here is the accent, color accent. And in this, maybe we would do, I have another one actually out here already. I think it's the same. I think I used this somewhere. Oh yeah, it's this yellow color right here. And now that's going to update too. So a nice cool way that you can update and have these changing things. And you could even have that with your background color here. Like maybe we could have had a class that instead of shoe red, shoe white, or we need those, but we could have had a class that was setting up the gradient and all of like our custom property defaults. And then, you know, the dark, this is a radial gradient on there too. So we could have done the same thing for our hero and use some dark gradients in there. Now this section's looking okay. I'm actually, we're really close, but we're going to get into what I'm most excited about in this entire tutorial. And I was really excited about these custom properties. I love being able to do this. And even this could be declared anywhere you want. So you could declare this higher in your CSS as well, depending on how you want to stay organized. I'm going to leave it all the way at the bottom, but you can really put it where you need to. And what we're going to do is, and you notice like we've done all of this so far without even writing a media query, which is really, really cool. But we do need to get a little bit, we will need a media query now, because here it's looking really ugly. So I think one thing we can even do at the small screens that's going to improve things is on my product, we have my title. If we come and take a look, we have our title and then we have the image here. And my image is the product image. So even here, like I wouldn't be opposed to nesting like this and saying any image that's inside of product I think it's fine. This card is built in a very specific way. But for this, we're going to push it a little bit, and we'll do, or we've set up a class. We might also use it. We're not pushing anything. We're just using what we've done. So ampersand again is product. So we have product image, and I think what we can do is a margin of -5-ish, 0, 0, 0. And just to have it stick out the top a little bit, it looks a little fancier doing that. The gaps here are getting a little tight, so maybe our margin bottom could be in, we could just space them out a little bit more at mobile. So something like that, it looks a little bit more dynamic, I think already. I like that more. But we're reaching a point probably around here-ish where they're getting kind of lame-o looking. And for me, the way I work with media queries, it really depends on the site. And a lot of the time it's where your layout breaks. And most things in the layout start breaking around the same time. One thing could be line length. It could be that now is a good time to go to 2 columns. So things like that are what I generally look out for. Now, that doesn't mean this is breaking at 600 and this is breaking at 620 and this is breaking at 676. So I need 3 media queries. I'm going to just do the 600 then and fix everything at once. You want to talk about maintainability, right? So limiting the amount of media queries you have is important, but I don't target specific devices. I target when my layout needs to change, basically. So it's around 700 pixels. So 700-ish, let's just say we do 750 divided by, that's not right. Let's start that over again. So say we do 750 divided by 16. 46, we'll go 45 times 16, perfect, 720. So right around 720, and we could play with that number, maybe make it a bit smaller, but right around 720. And this is where I love SAS, so at media, because you can nest this in here. Min width of 45 M. If you don't, M tends to actually be the safest thing to build media queries around. Just because if you zoom in and out, you can have some differences between devices. It's Safari that actually misbehaves if you don't use M's when you're zooming in and out. If you look in Google, you can find an article by Zell, Liu, I think it's Liu, Zell, anyway, Zell, who has a good article that examines why this is good. So here we go, that is perfect. And then in there, what I want to do is quite a few changes to my image. So the first one is, actually the first thing we're going to do, and this is the weird one, no one's probably expecting this, but we're going to use a float. So let's do a float left. And let's make this bigger so we actually hit our media query. Oh, you know what's going to help with the float left? Let's give this a width of like 50%. There we go. So it's floating and isn't like, oh my goodness. And I just realized we're floating left. I actually want to float this one to the right. Boom, there we go. So floats, Kevin, what are you thinking of using floats in 2020? This is what floats are made for, to make text wrap around things. You never would have thought that, eh? And actually, I'm all for nesting these, but I think I'm actually going to pull this out from here. It's going to make life a little easier. If I put my media query here, and then I'm going to have an and image, and we can wrap all this like that, which is exactly the same thing I just had, but it's just so I can put all the media queries I need for anything inside the product in one place, just so we don't have like 4 of them for 4 different things. It's a little bit of overkill. And if you're wondering what that's rendering to in the regular CSS, let's just go take a look. Product, here we go. So it's just doing the media query outside and then my product image in there. So it's another, just like the feature query, where I could write the feature query inside. The same thing here with SAS. I can do my media query inside, and SAS will export it properly and do that right there. So the other thing I want to do is the text align on this. Looks like crap now, so text align left. I think I want to make my image a little bit bigger. And as I said, this is what floats are made for. Floats are made to wrap text around content. Now, it's not looking fantastic yet, and there is one problem with floats. And what it is if I put an outline of 2 pixels solid, I'll just put red because we'll see it. It's floating around this box that's being created here. And I don't want it to do that. I want it to actually be able to go into these empty spaces that are being created. And we can do that with a really cool feature called shape outside. Now, shape outside can do a few different things. So I'm just going to do a really simple one of a circle. Let's just do, I always forget actually how this works. We'll do 50%. You can see actually this is actually coming in now. Let's do like 30%. There we go. So you can see my text is actually coming in on top of my image. And it's going, well, what? That's weird. Why is it doing that? You can see even here, it's actually working pretty good on that one. So let's open up my dev tools, because this is one of the coolest things in Firefox's dev tools. Let's make this a little bigger so you can actually see what I'm doing in here. And we'll find my image. And you see how here I have shape outside and my circle, and I get this little icon. And if I click on that, there's the circle. And this is what the text is wrapping around, is this circle that's right here. So I can actually make that bigger, make that smaller. So cool. And there's also the shape margin. So I can make a margin based on that shape as well. So here's my circle. And that means there's like a 1em space that the text can't come in within that circle. So as soon as the circle gets within 1em, it will push things away. One thing you'll notice here is it will not affect outside of the image. So it always stops at the image's actual bounds. So just be aware of that you can't make the circle bigger than your original image if you're doing a circle. The thing is, you don't have to do a circle. You can actually do a URL. And you want to guess what URL we're going to use? The image itself. And because it's a PNG, it knows it's transparent. So this is my shoe one. I have to go back a step. Image shoe1.png. And as I said, because it's a PNG, it supports that. And I can't actually, when it's the URL, we can't see that cool shape outside thing here in Firefox. So let's turn off that outline because we really don't need it anymore. And it's not fantastic at this screen size, but I just want to show you, like, as this increases in size, we can get this nice thing where, and actually I think it could look a little better. Let's go back to the original title. I think here we should do a text transform. I wanted to do this from the beginning, I just sort of forgot. And this can go back down to a 1 now, I guess. So see it here at the big sizes, what's happening is the text is wrapping in around my shoe, which is really, really neat. So when we get to see, like, even here, that looks pretty cool, right? But I think another thing that's going to improve this a little bit is if we change the margin. I don't know if we need the shape margin. I'll comment that out for now. And we might play with that. But on the image itself, I'm going to change the margin so it's not sucked out the top anymore. Instead of sucking out the top, I think what we want to do is suck it out -5em 0 0. So we could have it suck out the right side instead. So something like that. It's also, because it's floating, it's sticking out the bottom. So that's also kind of cool. Now it's breaking everything, obviously, at this size. But we are getting something like around here, like that's looking kind of neat, right? I'm just wondering here, I seem to have some empty space on the top there. Oh, you see, this is where what I'm going to do here, I'm going to cheat a little bit. Remember we used the spacer, the spacing? Oh, I can't cheat too much though. I'm just trying to think. Here at small sizes, I definitely want the shoe on top. Because we use the spacing class, it is causing, here it's perfect. So at small screen sizes it's doing what I want, but here it's actually adding a margin on this and not on the shoe, which is fine. So here I just need to be product title. We just want to get a little bit more specific. So our inside my media query, because we want to keep it when we're not inside the media query. So here we can add my and title, margin is a 0. And there we go, that's looking a little bit better. And I really like how it sticks out the right side there, just a little bit. And then when we come down, and actually you can see here, we are running into some spots where the text is pretty much touching. So I think what we will do is bring this on. And it's just going to make sure there's always a little bit of space, and it will never, well, this one's broken because, anyway, we'll get to that in a second. But you can see here it's working, everything's fine. Boom. Great. We are running into this issue of the shoe sticking out the bottom, but what I think we could do to actually fix this, I'm going to turn off, I'm not going to turn off the mobile mode. Let's just shrink this down a bit. I think I did it for everywhere else, and then I said I wasn't going to bother, but I think it would actually make sense, and we can get some really big titles coming in if we did that here too. So if we did a clamp on that, let's say 3rem, and do the same calc of 5 viewport width plus 1rem, and then have here, I'm going to get it like really big. Because I think it's actually, by having a bigger title, I think it's actually going to make it easier to get everything to fit in. So here, you see how like here it's small, but then the text is growing, it's still getting bigger. And because the text is bigger, it's actually making this whole area a little bit bigger. And then we could just increase the margin bottom on the entire product. I don't want to increase it everywhere because it's already at 5M. So I think I'm only going to do it in the media query. So here the margin bottom can become like 9M or something like that, just so the shoe doesn't touch and it just spills out a little bit. So the negative margin here, and it's sticking out the bottom just because it's floating and the rest of it's ignoring that. And it's just one of those happy accidents that's so cool that can happen because of floats. It's one of those times I think the float adds something instead of just being annoying. So really, really cool. Now you'll notice on this one it's breaking, and that's because it's using the same shape outside on this shoe as it's using for that one. It's using the same one on this one, and I don't think that's an issue because they're close enough that it's actually not breaking anything, and it looks pretty good, I think. So for this one, we will have to alter it a little bit though. So we can leave that at a larger screen size, but we'll want to shrink this down. So that one was my shoe white. This is where maybe it should have been shoe 1, shoe 2, shoe 3. I'm not sure. But we're going to stay inside my media query. And we can say, and... actually, no, it's not. We're going to stay inside the media query, though. I don't mind that this is nested, shoe white. Just we're raising the specificity a little bit. But that's fine. And we'll do a shape outside of URL image / shoe 2.png. And I'm thinking if this was a bigger project, what you could have is actually like a shoe right and a shoe left, and just have like a generic shoe class that could work one way or the other, if that makes sense. So like one would be a shoe that's facing to the right, one would be a shoe that's facing to the left. We're also going to do a float right on this one. Left, I mean. Float left on this one. Shoe white. Is that what it was called? Oh, I'm saying shoe white. I want shoe white, and then I'm actually going to say we're going to raise the specificity a lot on this one. That's okay. Shoe white, and then my product image. Yeah, we'll just do a double class. It's fine. Dot product image. We can select all that and just add our parentheses there. So that should be working, but it's not again. Okay, I made a mistake here with my nesting in my Sass that took me a minute to figure out. And the way I found it, actually, I looked at my regular CSS to see what it was output, and I got this monstrosity. So it's the shoe white inside a product, but shoe white's not inside a product. They're on the same level. So either I could pull this media query out, like make a second media query outside, or even put it inside this. But I'm actually going to just put an ampersand here. So it's really, we're boosting specificity a lot, but you can see it's now moved over. And the reason that's working is because if we go look at the compiled CSS, now it's product.shoe white, so a product that has shoe white. I don't like the shoe white here, so I think what I'm going to do is say just a shoe that's on the left, which does mean, and this could be like a double hyphen if you're really into BEM, which mean here my shoe white is also a shoe left. Just because I think that makes more sense. It's more reusable. It's not always the white shoe that will happen to be on the left. And then, you know, this shoe would change, like the shoe number 2, but it could be just a generic shoe that's on the left and everything will be fine there. So I think this becomes a very reusable class. It has high specificity, but it shouldn't cause any issues. You sort of want this to overwrite stuff, so I don't think that high specificity would actually cause any issues. But I will change the margin on it to be the opposite, so 0, 0, 0, negative 5M. So it's pulling it all the way the other way. It does look a little bit awkward here. Maybe my shape margin could be 2M on this one. I don't think it's as nice, but it's still, I think it's worth doing it. So we do get the, you know, like at this size, I think that actually works really well. It's just like the text rolling this way, I'm not as big of a fan of, but I do think that it does work. And here, you know, it's still working. All of these are working. You can play with where the media query kicks in, but then boom, I say boom a lot, and I really don't like saying boom, but every time I'm editing my videos and I say it, I'm like, oh, why did I say that again? But there we go, we get these nice looking cards just like that. And I think they look pretty good all the way down to the small screen sizes. And just like that, I think we have a pretty nice looking site. So in the end there, I think it did lead to a really nice looking site, and we got to use some really fun and exciting CSS there. The custom property usage is a way I really like using them. The shape outside is just such a cool property now. It's something you can have a lot of fun with, and it sort of brings floats back into relevance, which is kind of interesting. I don't think it's something you'll use every day, but it's one of those things that comes up in the right circumstance, and you're just so happy that you know it exists, and then you remember how to use it. And just, it's one of the things I love about CSS is all these exciting possibilities that we do have now. So once again, I want to say a big thank you to Brad for having me here on his channel. I'm just so humbled that he would invite me on here to make a video for him. So thank you very much, Brad. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I know it was a really long one. I hope the ride was worth it. And whatever you do from here on out, just try to keep on making your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.